Hello, and welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and I'm delighted to have with us today our very favorite local author of all time throughout space and throughout the universe, Jenn McKinlay. Before we begin our grilling of Jenn, I do have one brief commercial message. We do have copies of all of Jenn's books, including her newest book, Wait For It, at the Poison Pen Bookstore, signed by the author herself. So if you'd like a copy for yourself, for a friend, for everyone in your life, feel free to go online or give us a call. We'll be happy to hold one here for you or send one to you through the mail. And now let's go ahead, and I'd like to welcome Jenn back again to the Poison Pen.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. Now, my first question for you is, I know it's hard to believe, but there are people out there who don't know who you are. So we're going to work from that assumption, I know. But let's go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you were before you became a writer. And is it true that you got your start writing by ratting out your siblings to your parents?
Yes,
okay.
It is true. I will establish that right away. I am, like you, a recovering librarian. It's an elite group of us. I did, I want to say 20 plus years of service for Phoenix Public, and got my degree in Connecticut and was a librarian in Connecticut for a couple of years. While working as a librarian, it occurred to me that 2 weeks paid off stinks. And I wanted to be a writer. So I moved to Arizona, where I knew I could work part-time and, be a librarian and have enough money to write. So I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote, and it took forever, but finally, I want to say 5 or 6 years in, I finally sold something, romantic comedy to Harlequin, and that kind of started it. I still worked as a librarian for a while and did both, but eventually it just became writing. So I think it's been a writer for just a writer for over 7 years now. So that's nice. But I feel a little out of the library world. And I have, as you know, I write a library murder mystery series. And sometimes I'm like, has that changed? Do they still do that? So I had to re-up my card and start going in again and chatting up the librarians and go like, how's shop? Tell me what's going on.
Especially with the whole pandemic thing, it could change a lot for libraries.
It really did. It really did. It did. But as for the started writing by ratting out my siblings, yes, as you know, I'm a sugar motivated person. So to make bank when I was a kid, I found my mom's old portable typewriter, and I would type up the family newspaper, which was really just like, Donnie tied up Mark, and then Mary Ann ran out the back door, and then someone broke curfew, and da da da. And I would sell it to my mom for like 25 cents. That's candy money.
So you started writing, you started in romance, you branched out into mysteries, and now you've kind of come full circle back to romance and women's fiction. Your latest book is Wait For It. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Wait For It is set in Phoenix. So that was fun. It's actually my stomping ground when I was living by myself in Phoenix. So it's that 20th, for you locals, I used to live on 20th Street and Camelback in that area, which is awesome because it's built more, but it also had a lot of the old 50s housing, which is where I live. And Annabelle's journey is a lot like mine. I moved out to Arizona when I was 25. I think she's 28 in the novel. And it was really breaking with my past. I mean, I was a Connecticut Yankee, born and bred, and the desert was weird. Like when I landed here and I would see my first saguaros, I would just, those things are massive, and they're so central to just this part of Arizona. So yeah, it was pretty awesome. It was a big move. So that journey kind of inspired Annabelle. But I never actually intended to write her story. I wrote Paris, is always a good idea. And Annabelle she's a joke character in that book. I wrote her just to be kind of a counterpoint to the heroine, because Chelsea in Paris is always a good idea is wrapped pretty tight.
That's her.
So yeah, that's her. And so Annabelle was the younger sister who was just kind of a wild child. And it was mostly, she was divorced twice by the age of 28. She was just supposed to be a foil for Chelsea. And then, you know, my editor was like, well, what's your next book? Because I had agreed to write 2. And so I came up with one idea, and it was like, and then another idea. And then one day I'm in the shower, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Annabelle needs a story. I need to figure out why she's divorced twice by 28. So she became the next book.
And she moves out to Arizona, and one of the perks of her new job is a kind of cottage on an estate.
Yeah, she has one of those sweet like mini houses. I'm kind of obsessed with because I live in a frat house. I mean, most of the fraternity has left to go to college now, but for many years I've been living in a frat house, and I became super obsessed with she sheds. You know, those little separate buildings that women get. We don't get the garage, we don't get the man cave, but we get the she shed. And I always thought, man, that would be awesome. So if I can't have one, I will write something even better for a character. So I gave her, it's the landlord lives in one of those big mid-century modern types of houses, and then her house is like a mini version of it, and they kind of have a pool in between them. So she has my ideal little kind of workspace to get away from everybody, which is the beauty of fiction. You can't have it, but you want it. So
you create it.
Exactly. Somebody else gets to have it fictionally. You know, kind of like the fictional boyfriend. It's like, well, I can't have that boyfriend, so I'll just write him. You know, and then we can all have him.
But as they say in Great Britain, it's not all beer and Skittles for Annabelle, because her landlord is kind of curmudgeon, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Yeah. She is informed by the friends who set her up with this little house, the friends that she's working for, that he's retired and he's a little grumpy, and she's to avoid him, which Annabelle's personality is a pleaser and a little bit of sunshine. So, I can win him over, you know, that kind of thing. So she wants to meet him, even though they're like, no, just, you know, let it lie. But the landlord, when she arrives, hands her, well, he doesn't, but through the friend, she gets this list of rules, you know, no noise after 9 o'clock, no going in the pool, that's for the owner only, and all these terrible rules. And she's just like, but because he's retired, she just assumes that he's old. And then, of course, when she meets him, she finds out he's not, he's just grumpy.
One of the things I loved about the book were the notes that go back and forth between Nick and Annabelle. Was that something that you always wanted to do, kind of that epistolatory relationship? Was it inspired by You've Got Mail? Talk about the written aspect of their relationship.
It's interesting. I just did a talk with Carrie Winfrey, who wrote Very Sincerely Yours, which just came out really recently. And hers is an epistolary, but through email. And we did talk about You've Got Mail, which is, I think, her favorite, Nora Ephron. Mine is more When Harry Met Sally. But I have always loved kind of the epistolary. And I think the person who most inspired it is Lisa Kleypas for me, because she has, and I am terrible with remembering titles, but I think it's in, no, I'm not even going to say if it's the Hathaway or the Ravenels. The Kleypas fans are just like, oh, how can you not know this? But it's the one with it's the youngest sister. I think it's a Hathaway, but she starts writing letters to a captain who's at war. But she writes as a different person. So then he comes back, and she's this wild, feral, youngest child, woman of this family. And then he has a hard time accepting that, you know, she took on a different personality. And that kind of was like how I was thinking about with Annabelle. You know, he's writing these curmudgeonly notes, and then she has a hard time realizing, oh, no, it's the hot guy I saw in the window who's writing those notes. You know, I like those.
Another aspect that kind of gives her a few hiccups is her work relationship. And I love the fact that she's working at this advertising agency with her best friend and her husband. And it's a great job, except there's one of those co-workers who everyone thinks is really nice, but who's really willing to slip the knife in your back when no one's looking. Was that kind of inspired by some of your own experiences in the work world, or?
Yeah, I think it's virtually impossible to work in an office and not have somebody who probably Carson is the bad guy, but he's probably not quite as bad as Carson, but it's the person in the group project who doesn't do any of the work, but takes the credit, you know, and then over promises and under delivers, that guy. But with this particular one, he has a real vendetta because he wanted the job that she got. And, you know, I think now in particular, especially with the pandemic, we've been hearing so much about women. And obviously I don't talk about the pandemic and wait for it because we're going to pretend it never happened fictionally for me forever and ever, amen. But but one of the things that I've heard people talking about during the pandemic is that, you know, all of a sudden everybody had to work at home, and it was the women who lost their jobs because they were the ones who immediately had to do the childcare.
Yeah.
And it was the women who also had to figure out the childcare and keep the job. So it was just kind of one of those things where I was just like, wow, you know, there really are still a lot of stereotypes in the office place. And in a way, I kind of wanted her to deal with that as a woman taking a creative director job that a guy wanted, and then kind of the fallout with his reputation and her being new. And I mean, office politics are complicated. I have had people say to me, oh, nobody could behave like that, they'd get fired. But I'm like, you haven't worked in an office then.
No.
It is amazing what people can get, like right up to where it's a legal problem. They can get away with stuff, you know?
Now, Wait for It is set in Phoenix, your stomping ground. Was it more challenging, easier to set a book where you know the place? I mean, there's actual physical landmarks like Durante's and things like that. Talk about writing a book in a setting that where you live in the real world.
It was really nice to give a nod to places that I enjoy. And one of the things I think when she lands, one of the first things she sees is Tovria Castle. Which when I drove by it, because when I first got here, I lived in Mesa, but I worked in downtown Phoenix. So I drove, and it was before we had any of the highways. So yes, I've been here that long. And I would drive by that, and I was obsessed with that castle. So of course, it was fun to like kind of mention the things that struck me when I got here. It's also challenging though, because you could be really boring. It can become just a love letter to the things that you like. And I tried, you know, and then when I was done, I was like, oh, I didn't mention that. And I didn't mention that. And I should have mentioned that. You know, it just became ridiculous. So I was like, well, I tried to hit the high notes without dragging it down too much, you know, and a lot of things were just passing reference. Like you hear that they went to Tovria Castle and you hear that they went to the Desert Botanical Garden, but I didn't like make the readers walk through the garden. So it was a chance. It's kind of like, again, writing the library series. Being a librarian, it's like I could really do a whole volume on cuttering and bore people to death, you know. And they're all sitting there going, "Librarians cut? What does that mean? What does that mean?" So, you know, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I think it's the light. I think it is. I know when I've been in there looking up things and then I follow the numbers now, I'm like, who did that? But not that I'm judging. But.
One of the other kind of quintessential elements to your books is there's almost always a pet. And there's a kitten in this book called Sir. Talk a little bit about the role pets play in your books, and then maybe a little bit about in your own life. Give us some stories there too.
I have too many. I'm also the geriatric ward of pets now because they're all getting really old. For me, pets give you, it's kind of like why I like having relationships and mysteries. When your character falls in love or they get involved with somebody, you get to see their underbelly and their vulnerability. I think it's also very telling how a person responds to an animal. And that was a real thing for Nick because, you know, the hero, he very specifically was like, no pet. So it was really fun to kind of write how he was going to deal with this. Because of course she says it's not a pet. It's like a dinner guest who kind of crashes on the couch. I haven't even named it, which is why they call it Sir, you know, because he's black and white, like a tuxedo cat. So he looks like a gentleman. But for me, it's in the writing, it's that one other place you can show your character's true self, how they respond to a pet. And then for me, I'm just a sucker. It's like every time most of my pets have been found, like literally on the front patio in the back alley. It's like, oh, and then I'm the one who always says, okay, we can't have any more pets. You know, at our peak, we had 3 cats, 2 dogs, and 2 fish. And now we're down to 3 cats, 1 dog, and we still have the 2 fish. The fish are never going to die. I'm just convinced of it. They're supposed to die. They don't die at our house, but if you're a fish, you should come to my house, apparently. For us, they're always found, and I'm always the one who's like, okay, I found a cat nanny. She's going to take the kitten. It's all good. And then the family is always like, no, we have to save them. Yeah, same with the dog. I'm like, I found someone who'll take her. No, we have to, you know. And then I'm the one who ends up the walking, the feeding, the vet visits. And I'm like, wait. But I love my animals. I mean, I love my animals more than I love most people. So, you know, as you do.
You've written both mysteries and romantic fiction, women's fiction. This is kind of a broader question to your own writing. Which is easier for you, killing people or kissing, making them kiss?
Killing. Hands down, killing them. That's so dark. It kind of worries me. I think the trouble or the difficulty with romance is that your hero and heroine, and Jennifer Ashley actually was the one who told me this when we were talking about mass market romance. Women's fiction is a little bit different. You have a little bit more leeway because it's more of a heroine journey. But she said, ideally, the hero and heroine are never apart for more than a couple pages. And yet these books, and they have to have a sustained emotional conflict. And then these books are supposed to be like 100,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard. Especially if you're like me, who doesn't really like to torture your characters to begin with. Like, I have a really hard, can't it just be a misunderstanding? Mm-hmm. But then mysteries are great because the relationships are secondary to the mystery. The mystery's a dead body. I usually try to kill off somebody who's made me mad in my real life, you know, mm-hmm. Not that you can recognize it. It's kind of my therapy. And then, you know, solving a mystery kind of moves the plot along. So there's emotions, but they're just not the driving. So yeah, I laugh when people are like, oh, romances are so easy. And I'm like, write one, write a good one. We'll talk.
It's interesting that you said what Jennifer had said, because there is one book that kind of broke that rule by Sherry Thomas called Private Arrangements. And now I understand why people were so shocked by it, because she keeps the husband and wife apart for 10 years. And then,
yes, I read that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then Sherry can break all the rules she wants. She's Sherry Thomas.
She's Sherry, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, she can. And we will read them and be happy.
That's true. Okay, now I have a few more general questions for you. Why do you adore Inflight magazines? What is your fascination with them? And this is before, when you could travel, not now.
I know. And then I actually did fly a couple of times during the pandemic, and they didn't have any Inflight magazines, I guess, for germs or whatever. And I was just kind of, because, you know, I have the crossword and the Sudoku, and then I like to read the articles. I forget. There was an article, and I can't really remember it, but it was something about, I think it was about making your own luck. I don't know, but it kicked off like a whole idea storm for me. So for me, I love Inflight magazines because it's always travel and food. And then there's just these great little psychological articles that they put in there. And I find them very useful for character development or plots. So there's definitely a love of that. But yeah, I think the last time I flew, I'm trying to remember, I think the magazines are back, but we'll see how long they stay.
Yeah. You've talked a little bit about the differences between writing romance and mystery. Let's go broader, just your writing process in general. Mystery gives you some structure, romance to a lesser degree, but when you start a book, how do you approach it? Is it with a character in mind? Do you have an idea for the plot? Do you have like a PowerPoint presentation with everything set?
That would be great. I would love a PowerPoint presentation. I think consistently, pretty much, it's never 100%, but mostly I think I start my books with dialogue. And I think that's usually the first everything I think about. Like when it's the cupcake bakery mysteries, I know it's going to be Mel and either Marty or Angie, and Olivia's going to come in and mix things up. It's like I just kind of know, and then it very organically kind of comes to me. The mysteries themselves, I'm not sure the number of mysteries. I think I've written about 35, but I won't swear to it, but it's around there. I've killed a lot of people. I feel kind of bad about it. I did a pie chart once, and it turns out I think my most popular method is blunt trauma, possibly stabbing. So don't make me mad, and if you do, keep knives and heavy things away from me. But just kidding. With the mysteries though, because it used to be I could think of my own unique ways to kill people, but I've noticed the last couple. I just finished writing Strawberry to Live, and I had to watch the ID channel and watch the true crime shows for a while just to get something. And then it was just like, oh, that would totally work in Old Town. Yes. And then I had to take copious notes and look up the actual case and read those notes. And then I had kind of a stepping off place. So I've had to go a little bit wider with my plots. And when I get a plot, like, okay, so now I have a plot, like for that one. I have two writing buddies, Kate Carlisle and Paige Shelton. And if I get super stuck, the three of us, we have a little plot group and we'll just carve out. It used to be in person for whole weekends, which was super fun. Now it's on Zoom, as is everything. And we'll hash out our plotting issues. Like, have I killed this guy this way before? Or what do you guys think? Are there any holes in this plot? And then we'll all kind of help each other. So once I have the plot, then I start right away with that opening scene. And that's usually when the conversation will just come to me, because I know pretty much where the body's going to show up. So I know how much dialogue, and then I write comedy too. So I always like to start it off kind of on a comical, ridiculous opening scene, and then boom, dead body. Yay. And I work off about a 10-page outline. So after plot group, I usually have 10 solid pages. I don't generally deviate. And then with the women's fiction and the romance, those are the mass market romances that I did. I did one, as you know, one series that was the Bluff Point, it always had a dog in it. So yeah, there's back to the pet thing. Yes, I love my pets, and I love people with pets. So that series was really kicked off by the different pet in the story.
Yeah.
So it was kind of inspired. The first one was inspired by her finding a puppy. And then the second one, the poor thing inherits a foul-mouthed parrot and a geezer golden retriever. And then the last one, I think, that was much more split between the hero and the heroine, and it opens with the hero saving a kitten in a blizzard, and So with those, I kind of knew where the plot was going, because I knew it was going to be based around this pet, and then what the pet brings into the person's. Like, the pet was always kind of the conduit to the hero meeting the heroine. So those I kind of knew. And I could write a 10-page or 15-page. They're usually longer when they're romances, because I have to put in more like conflict. And and Kate Carlisle is actually fabulous with that. She'll say, you're not torturing them enough. Come on. I'm like, I don't want to. I like them. It's supposed to be a really short book.
You're perfectly comfortable hitting somebody over the head, but torturing is where you draw the line.
Exactly. One of my sons, when he was younger, and this always cracks me up, we were watching Amy Adams and I think Patrick Dempsey in the movie Enchanted, and the evil person in that, I think it's the stepmother, it's always the stepmother, poor thing, turns into like this fire breathing dragon, and she's like on top of the Empire State Building or something, and my son was sitting like right there. He did it totally fine. But when she was mean to the girl and hurt her feelings, I look and he's in the hallway watching it. And I thought, yeah, Acorn Oak, you're my kid. So, yeah.
Now, I've read somewhere that your favorite part of the writing process is revising. What does that mean?
It's awesome. I like, for me, the hardest part is the first draft and the middle specifically. It's like sometimes you just feel like you are going to die before you come out of the middle, which it shouldn't be like that. The middle should be, layered and interesting. But for some reason, for me, it's the dead marsh. I can't, it's always an endeavor. So the first draft, when I finally get to the end of it, and a lot of times I just have to, even if I've changed the plot, I'll write a thing that says notes. And then below that, I'll be like, oh, you changed that guy's name, go back and change all that. It's like little notes to myself, because even though I don't deviate from the outline, I might change things that I then have to know to go back and clean up on that first draft. So I just power through to the end. But then the revisions, I'm fortunate to have a tremendously awesome editor. I know you know her. She's fantastic. And she gets my voice, so she knows when to tell me to change things, and she knows, when to let me be. We have a very good working relationship where I'm like, but she trusts me, you need to fix this. So when she gives me her input, and it's usually like a 1-page notes on, I don't think the character would talk like that. And what happened here, you kind of didn't answer that question that you established in chapter 3. That's when my notes fail. I can go through. But it's also that usually when I get my revisions, the book's been out of my head, hopefully for 2 or 3 months. So when I come back to it, I have all those moments of, I wrote that, I don't remember that. Oh, that's pretty good. And then I have those moments of, oh, fix it. So I like revisions because it's kind of like you're decorating the house you've already built. The house is built, and now you get to go in and just, make it really pretty and nice. And so that's my favorite.
Because you've written a number of books that are series, I'm always fascinated. How do you keep things straight? Do you have like a Bible, where you write characters' names and things? Do you wing it and then somebody writes and tells you that character didn't live on that street, you got it all wrong? Talk about writing series.
I wish I had a Bible. If I was a better person, I'd have a Bible. I don't have a Bible. And people, you would think that you wouldn't forget the eye color of a character or the name even of a character, but amazingly you do, because you've written 3 other books in between. In the Back to the Cupcake series, one of the characters before she got married was Angela Delora. And I have one book where she's getting yelled at by a parent or something, and it's, Angie Marie Delora, rah, 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 rah. And then in another one is Angie Lucia Delora. And someone wrote me and they, wow, is her middle name Maria or Lucia? So then in the next book that came out, I was like, Angie Maria Lucia Delora. I win, But yeah, it is hard. And if I had a Bible, I wouldn't have made that mistake. But I like to look at it as just making the book better. But I've only mixed up the heroine once, and I think I got a Library Lovers manuscript back from the copy editor. So it went through my editor too. And I had changed Lindsay, who's the heroine in the library series, to Mel, who's the cupcake baker. I think that's the only time that's happened. But yeah, it was significant. It was like, oops. But yeah, I wish I had a Bible. I'm not very good at keeping track. I will frequently, I remember, God, this is when you're very grateful for social media. I had forgotten one of the characters has 7 brothers. Why did I think that would be hilarious? And that's where I get myself into trouble. I always write something thinking it'll be hilarious, and then it bites me on the rear end when I'm like, I can't, why? What was that for? But I gave her 7 brothers, and I could not remember all 7 of their names. And I spent a whole day, and I thought, well, I could go through the book, but then where did I mention them all in the book? Because now we're like 11 books in. So I was just like, well, which book do I mention all of them? Because in each book, a couple of them show up, but not usually all 7 at the same time. And I couldn't remember. So I finally just put it on Facebook, and some lovely reader wrote back, wow, it's Dom, Sal, Ray, Tony, Polly, Al. See, I just forgot one again. But anyway, they saved my bacon, and I'm very appreciative.
When you're writing your mystery series, some of them have gone into high numbers. How do you write the new ones so that a reader who isn't familiar with it can pick it up and not feel lost, but you still bring along all those other readers?
it is a challenge, and to be totally truthful, I don't know that I've succeeded. I will see people review the books and say, oh, you can read it by itself, but you should totally read all the ones beforehand. And that's kind of what I would say to anybody. I'm like, don't read the last one. Read all of them, because that would make me happy. I try not to, and I think that's kind of the beauty of mysteries, is that you have one very specific murder to solve. Or so even though there's a lot going on and you get a sense that these characters have a lot of backstory, hopefully whatever subplots we have going on are fully contained in each book. So I think like for better for worse, I think you will get so much more out of any series. And I'm a series junkie. I love series, and I'm also a librarian. So I always have to start with book one. Like if I buy book 3 and I find out there's 2 more, it's like, oh, nope, wait. I have to go in order, because I want that whole character development. I don't want to miss anything. So I think most writers, you try to make them self-contained, but I think for the reader, it's like, I think you really enjoy reading the whole series from the beginning.
I know in addition to being a big writer, you're also a big reader. So can you talk a little bit about what you've been reading this summer that you'd like to share with others?
Well, John and I were talking earlier, and we think it's funny that as a librarian, summer, I can't get away from summer reading. Like I read all year, and I read every day, or I try, unless I pass out exhausted because of deadlines. I read. I'm the person who reads before bed. Like that's pretty much what knocks me out. And I will go to bed if it's a good book, I'm in bed at 8. It's like, oh, I gotta go to bed. My husband just handed me my current read, which is amazing. And it's Taylor Jenkins Reid, I believe, and it's Malibu Rising. So I'm in the middle of that one, and I'm completely engrossed. It's, 4 different characters, a lot going on. Before that one, I read the latest Lisa Kleypas. I think it's Devil in Disguise, which was terrific. Held up. And it's really good that you were asking about series, because hers are very family series. So you can read them alone, but then you can go back and read about all the siblings, which is tremendous. That one was great. And then before that one, I read The Midnight Library by Matthew. Is it Matt Haig? Yeah, it's Matt Haig. Yeah. And I loved it. It's funny because I loved it, and then I gave it to my mom, and she was like, I'm undecided. I'm like, how are you undecided? It's such a great book. So that cracks me up. It's like, because she was a librarian too. So I'm like, how are you undecided? But I think that always reminds me, and this is what I try to remember when I hear from readers who don't love me. Shocking, I know. But it's all subjective, and every reader brings their entire life to the book that they're reading. So for me, Matt Haig's book was phenomenal because it talked about regret. That's kind of the main theme, is how you view your life through a lens of regret, and should you or shouldn't you. And it's really interesting. And with my mom, it's like she's kind of like, I don't regret anything. I don't need to. So we're in 2 very different places in our lives. So that book really resonated with me, but with her, not so much. She enjoyed it. She liked characters, but she was like, the overlying wasn't as. And then I read Circe, which is not something I ever would have expected, Madeline Miller's book. And I have Song of Achilles on deck because I loved Circe so much. Totally unexpected. I don't know what I expected, but it was just one of those, I couldn't put it down. It was terrific. And then you're getting my whole summer. I also read Evie Drake Starts Over, which was really, really good. Another kind of, it was interesting because if you are curious about likable heroines, I think I can talk about the beginning without giving anything away. She's about to leave her husband, and he's killed in a car accident. So it's kind of like, ooh, what a great story. How do you put that down? You have to find out, So yeah, that was great. And then I'm trying to think. I think those are the ones I can. Oh, I've been listening to, because I'm a big. I walk my dog every day, so I have a lot of audiobooks. I've been listening to Nothing to See Here, and I believe the author's Kevin Wilson. and that's fantastic. He's the kind of writer and of course there's an actress reading it, so it's even, sometimes that's even better, sometimes not so much. In this case, I think it's even better because she's amazing, and I can't remember her name, and I feel really badly about that. But I'm listening to her, act out his words, and I'm thinking, I have to quit writing. This guy's so good. I'm done. I'm retiring. I'm out. So it's one of those, I'm enjoying it so much, and I'm also like, ah.
Wow. Well, I think it's interesting how you mentioned different readers' reactions, yours and your mother's, to that one book, because you are right. And that's something probably your library background would also reinforce, that when you're trying to match readers up with books, you have to get out of your own way and think that they're going to like it, because they may not. It's all about the reader.
It's hard because if you have, and I think all passionate readers feel this way, if you have a favorite book, it's really hard not to judge people who maybe don't like it. I think Barbara and I have had a few things where she was like, oh, that book was terrible. And I'm like, I really liked it. I have to reevaluate our whole relationship, which I don't. It's subjective. And I do think, and this, I think, as a writer, it helps you to keep in mind that you don't know what the readers are bringing to your work. I mean, what I think is hilarious, because we do know comedy is super subjective. So what I think is hilarious, someone else is just, and that's okay. But also we bring our whole life history into the books we read. Like I was talking to, I think it was Carrie Winfrey, about, she and I both kind of write cinnamon roll heroes. And Wait for It was different for me because he's not a cinnamon roll. He's kind of grumpy and a type A, but you realize that's just kind of the exterior to the cinnamon roll inside. Because I'm not a super, I don't really like alpha. I don't mind reading other people's alpha heroes, but I can't write one, because if any man ever tried to tell me what to do, I'd be like, what? And she was saying the same thing, but that's me bringing my personality. I think there are other women who just would love an alpha. Okay.
Well, yeah.
So it's interesting.
Look at J.R. Ward. You mentioned,
I do love those. I love that series. See, I love to read them. I just couldn't date one of them.
You mentioned cinnamon roll heroes. For those that aren't familiar, give a brief explanation of that, because 2 years ago I didn't know what they were either.
Oh, really? Yeah. I don't even know when the term became popular, but I knew when I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, those are my guys. Cinnamon roll heroes are just, they're sweet and gooey and nice, but they also need to be masculine, and they're not like nerd guys. I mean, they're attractive and they're strong, but they're the kind of guys that are strong in their sensitivity. They're the ones who I think are kind more than domineering. Like, to me, an alpha hero is someone who's, I'm going to tell you how to do it, and I'm going to take over, and you're going to be fine, and you're going to like it that way. That's my personality, but I'm an alpha. But cinnamon rolls are just they're just kind of the guy who, the plumbing's broken, they show up and fix it. They don't have to make a big fuss about it. It's like they're the caregivers, and they're the smarter, not smarter, I hate to say it that way, but they're usually smart guys. They're smart, and they're kind, and they're funny, and they have their baggage and their issues, but overall they're sweet and safe, and they're my favorite.
You mentioned Carrie Winfrey, whose books I adore. Do you want to give a little shout out about her books to readers? Because
I love her books. Yes, I think Carrie Winfrey and I are very similar in that, we're both Nora Ephron's fans. We both love rom-com. She wrote YA, and then she started to write adult. And I think the first one was Waiting for Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
So that kind of tells you, what all she's about. And then the next one is Not Like the Movies, which is kind of a continuation of the first book. And then the third one is Very Sincerely Yours, which, talk about a cinnamon roll hero. It's a children's TV star male. And he has an email correspondence with a viewer who writes to him for advice, and that turns into a darling relationship. But yes, hers are sweet, very sweet, not too much steam, and just delightful rom-coms. And she's definitely one of my favorites. She's
got your sharp sense of humor too. It's kind of that very acidic, but in a pleasant way.
Yeah, they're not like her heroines are not pushovers, you know, they have their sharp edges, but they're very charming.
Well, I think we have time for a few questions from your Myrida fans out there on Facebook. And the first question is, how much input do you have when it comes to your book covers and book titles?
Ooh, that's I think most writers will tell you that's kind of a shock when you get into the business. They ask your opinion and they do value your opinion, but usually sales and marketing are the ones who decide what your cover is going to look like and what your title's going to be. I've had some knockdown, drag out fights about titles, and I've lost every one. So that tells you who has the ultimate title power. Usually I've lost, and the sales and marketing team's been right. So there's that too. They know what they're doing. So you have to trust them. With the cover art, actually, I have been so fortunate, especially, all of my covers. I think the women's fiction, Wait For It, is perfect. I mean, it's just the perfect vibe for that book. Paris, I was so happy when I saw it, and they did let me choose. This is the funny thing about the Paris book is they did 2 mock-ups, pretty much of the same cover, but one was in bright red and cobalt blue, and then the other one was kind of pink and aqua. Because what's changed, and I didn't think about this because everything's always changing, is they pick their covers a lot for the thumbnail.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which I was like, thumbnail? Who looks at the thumbnail? Well, everybody.
Yeah. When you're looking on your phone, that's what you see. A book.
Yeah, it's like it's big.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And I chose the pink and aqua for the Paris book, and I stand by that choice. Mm-hmm. So, but then I was always like, oh, maybe people would have seen the thumbnail more if it was red. I don't know. But the mysteries, I just feel so lucky. Each one is very different. The London Hat Shop series has a watercolor kind of vibe to it, you know, very London, rainy. And then the cupcakes, they just always make cupcakes front and center and like so good looking. I have to go have a cupcake. And then with the Librarian one, the artist for that is just genius. She takes every cover, and I'll say, well, like in the one that's coming out in November, there's an election happening. Maybe we could have something that looks like an election. I mean, it's not actually in the book, but they're kind of gearing up to one. So she puts, you know, red, white, and blue bunting, and then the dog, because there's a rescue dog in it. There's always a rescue dog in her cat or whatever. But what her covers are, she always has an open book. So when you look at the covers, it's always an open book, and then the illustrations in the open book. I don't even know how she does it, but she's amazing. So you know, I make sacrifices to the cover gods, and it pays out.
The next question, is it true that you really dressed up as a pigeon?
Oh, yeah. Because the pigeon drives the bus. Yeah, I do a lot of the openers for the Library Lover series, that's the children's library. I was a children's librarian for my last 8 years. So I did it all. I did legal and government documents and general fiction. And then I rounded out my career as 8 years of a children's librarian. And I was in the outreach program. So I was sent all over Phoenix with my little bucket of felt boards and musical instruments and picture books. And I would try to dress up to get these kids who were in daycares, you know, all over the valley, and usually in the, you know, Central Phoenix, South Central area where they really needed someone to come and do stories. And I would show up in costume, you know, all the time. I'd look like a puppy, I'd look like a duck, whatever.
The next question is, your cupcake mysteries are set in Old Town Scottsdale. In Wait For It, did you have a specific neighborhood in mind? And for me, I thought it was like the Camelback 40th Street area, but
yeah, it is kind of that core. It's changed a lot. We were talking about it earlier. I never name any streets because I like to keep things nebulous. Like even we're on the 14th cupcake book, and I never say what streets are on in Old Town, mostly because I'm afraid people would go looking and it wouldn't be there. And you know, I would go looking.
Dry cleaner or something like that.
Exactly. Like what happened? So in my mind, wait for it, is the 20th and Camelback area. Like, so it's north of Camelback, kind of tucked into that Biltmore. You know, there's some really nice homes back there. It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, and they're tucked away. Like, you don't even know they're there. I live on 20th, and because there used to be a Borders. If you remember Borders, there used to be a
Yes.
Borders on 24th and Camelback. And I would walk through the neighborhood, and I was in my cute little 1950s duplex that I shared with, like, I had the front half of the house, and Betty had the back house, back half, this older lady, because it was divided into two. And then I would walk through the neighborhood, and I would be walking by these like huge mansions. A lot of them were mid-century modern, some of them were even older, and I just thought, wow, you would never know they were there. So that's kind of what was in my mind when I wrote Wait for It.
The next question is, this is the second book you've written that's been published during a pandemic. What's been good about that? If there has been anything, what's been bad about that? Talk about writing during a pandemic.
Wow. Yeah, I'm so sad that I'm not at the pen with you, like hanging out in person and seeing the readers. That's been really tough. It wasn't in the beginning of the pandemic because I thought, oh, we'll be fine. Now it's getting really old, really old. And one of the big mystery writers conferences was supposed to be in New Orleans, I think. Yeah, BoucherCon. And I can't remember if it was this weekend, next weekend. I'm not sure which weekend in August. Maybe doesn't matter because it got canceled. And that's been crushing. Like, not having those. I'm beginning to realize after a year and a half that those conferences just kind of fill up the well when you can be with, as you know, because you've gone to them too. I mean, RWA and stuff like that. You meet, you know, it's like meets like. So these are the only people in the world who understand what I do every day for a living. And then having the added getting to meet the readers who go to the conferences, it was just, yeah, I'm sad. Writing in a pandemic isn't that bad because my people are older. So, I mean, I live in a frat house, but like the two youngest are out, and then the husband's back at the job. So it's actually just really quiet here now. So that's kind of weird. But I was fortunate during the initial shutdown to have friends with an empty house because all of a sudden we had a college student online and a high school senior online and a husband online and then me trying to work. It was tense, but we got through it. But yeah, I used somebody else's house as an office for like 3 months just so I could finish. Wait for It, actually. That was Wait for It.
Okay, before we have to close things off, tell us a little bit about what's coming next for you. And I know there's a lot in the pipeline.
There always is. Thankfully, I'm very thankful. And thank you, readers, for making sure that there's always more in the pipeline. I guess I don't know if I can go with it. Well, why not? You're here, you're paying attention. I have recently signed on to write 2 more women's fiction.
Oh, yay. Good for you.
So I'm very excited. It's not a super secret, but you know, I don't know. It's one of those things. Does the publisher want to
tell anyone?
I know right now it's going to go viral. Jen's writing another one. The first title is called Summer Reading. Oh. And it's set on Martha's Vineyard, which I recently went to, you know, research. And it is you'll love this. It's a dyslexic heroine who's a chef who ends up in charge of her half-brother that she doesn't have much of a relationship with on Martha's Vineyard for the summer, and falls for the hot guy librarian in Oak Bluff.
So you've reversed all the tropes.
Yes. Everything's changed up. So I'm so excited about it. It's pretty much done. And like I said, the contract is signed. So I'm very excited about that one. And then the second one is one of those to be determined. It's going to be another, like, I'm in the shower and like, oh, there's an idea, I hope. And then in November, Killer Research comes out. That's the next Library Lovers. So I'm very excited about that one. And then in the spring, Strawberried Alive, the next Cupcake mystery comes out. And the women's fiction actually won't come out until 2023. So I'm going to have a summer to and I guess I can announce this. We haven't signed the contract, but I think it's a go. So if things change, please forgive me. But because I've been saying for a long time, if I get a window, I will write another hat shop mystery. It looks like there's going to be another hat shop mystery.
Oh,
So I'm very excited about that. And it's set in a castle. And I won't say whether there's going to be a wedding or not because I haven't decided. But right now, the working title is Fatal Fascinator.
oh, clever.
Yeah, I hope if they let me keep it, you know.
Tell them you hate it and they'll.
Right, it's terrible. It's a placeholder.
Well, I can't believe how quickly our time's gone by. It's just been so much fun chatting with Jenn McKinlay, whose new book is Wait for It, available at the Poison Pen, signed by the author. Jenn, thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you for tuning in to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen.